Welcome to the Rock Solid Families Podcast. I am Linda Hutchison here with my man, Merrill. How are you, honey?
I'm doing pretty good. Just came in for a bike ride. Doing good.
Hey, look, we're color coordinated today. We're on all.
We planned that, guys.
We're working on all cylinders today. We're jiving, and we're kind of talking about that today. About when
we're jiving
when we're not jiving and grooving together. When we're not kind of in sync.
Yeah, we're going to talk today about a topic that even you and I have struggled with, and that is, can you and your spouse have the difficult conversations, the ones that you both feel the tension between you, and you just go, how am I going to land this plane, or do I even want to go there? And in particular, I'll say, hon, this is a struggle for me in our marriage. This has always been my deal. I'm relatively quiet when it comes to confrontation. And when I feel the confrontation and I just don't know the outcome, like I'm not certain of it, I would just rather avoid it. And like I'm telling you, that's not a good idea, okay?
Yeah.
But that would be my nature. Like, how can I get out of this one? Maybe I'll just go, cut wood for like 3 weeks or something and just do anything to avoid it. So, so it's not good. And I will say that that's a big deal with a lot of the men I work with, that they just go, I've used the phrase before, whatever kind of thing, and they just back out of it because they don't know how to handle it.
Yeah. And us ladies, and I've struggled with just having too high expectations and kind of expecting perfection out of you and then wanting grace for me. And so a lot of women feel that way, like they're justified in being angry or pouting or kind of biting their spouse's head off. And so that's the vacillator in me that kind of, we've talked about love styles or attachment styles before. And so, that creates, and I just was talking to a couple the other day about that. Like, you have to provide a safe place for your partner to feel comfortable bringing hard things to you, having difficult conversations. And so we're going to really talk about what happens when you just keep kicking the can down the road and how do you kind of approach difficult conversations. So that's our topic today.
Yeah. Before we go any farther, let's thank our sponsors and a couple of announcements. I want to thank Maxwell Construction, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and the Hoosier Ice House for sponsoring the Rock Solid Family Podcast. We also just want to thank all of you guys out there who continue to support what we do and grow our ministry here at Rock Solid Families. We're opening up our new office here.
Yes.
Let's see. It'll be actually the week that you guys hear this.
Yeah. Pretty quick.
Yeah. So down in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. So down Industrial Drive.
Yep.
I'm going to probably mess up the name of the building we're in, the Care Resource Connection Center.
I think,
Care
like
Resource
that.
Connection, I think it is. It's down on Industrial Drive. So we'll be getting you more and more information about that, but we're looking forward to taking care of that. How about anything else on announcements?
Well, the Families Rock class we have every month, we call it the Families Rock Intensive. That is going to be, the next one is April 26th at the Lawrenceburg Firehouse from 8:30 in the morning till noon. We usually try to do it on the last Saturday or the fourth Saturday. And so this one will be April 26th. May will be May 24th,
I think you said,
the fourth Saturday, because I think there's 5 Saturdays in May. So if it's something that this conversation kind of sparks the whole need for co-parenting, having unity with your spouse or your ex, then this would be a great class for you to kind of help those difficult conversations about parenting. But, hon, I don't even know what we're going to title this show, but just navigating those minefields. Sometimes we're stepping on landmines we don't even really know are there.
Yeah.
We're triggering things and our spouse gets defensive or kind of, as you said, you were an avoider. And so you would help just hold it in.
I like that you said you used the past tense. I was an avoider. I still am, guys.
You have moments, but I think we've learned that doesn't end well, that it just kind of builds things up to it blows.
Yeah.
And then it's like, where did that come from? Well, he's been holding it in for 6 weeks to a month or whatever, and it's just not healthy.
Yeah.
In a
well,
relationship.
You used the phrase, hon, earlier that I think, it's important to land on, and that is, within your house, within your own marriage, there has to be a feeling of safety. And what do I mean by that? It's like, well, I don't want to get my head bitten off here, right? So nobody wants to get hurt. And if if the conversation does not feel safe, and why wouldn't it feel safe? Well, if I'm going to defend or attack,
Right.
if those things are happening, or you have the feeling that could happen, then we don't have a safe place here. And so, learning to handle that, like, well, what would it look like to make it safe? We're going to talk about that. Like, how could I approach it so that my husband or my wife would say, hey, I'm going to bring this up and let's go.
And let's make it clear. We're not talking about a spouse is going to hit you.
Right.
Sometimes it could be. Well,
that certainly isn't safe,
But I have a lot of men who push back and get very angry at me when I say your wife doesn't feel safe to share this with you, or vice versa, because they're like, I've never touched her. I'm like, okay, I'm talking about maybe emotional safety, right? That they don't feel safe and feeling heard. So their fear of conflict, their fear of you blowing up. And so that's something, I say this all the time in session, and we've said it here before. There's a huge difference between being a peacekeeper and being a peacemaker.
Right.
Peacekeeper just wants to avoid conflict. And so they're just going to brush under the rug or avoid hard conversations. But a peacemaker is like, I'm going to speak the truth in love because I know that that's what's best for our relationship and for the betterment of each person. So that's where we're really trying to work toward in this session in our podcast today.
Let's be clear. This takes two willing players,
and healthy people, honestly.
Right. And if you say, I do want to become the peacekeeper. In other words, I want to do the work. I'm sorry, I want to become the peacemaker. I want to make it right. Okay, so I'm willing to do the work. But your partner is not. Then you're going to see people drift into the peacekeeper because they're like, listen, I've tried all kinds of things, and the door just keeps getting slammed on me. So this is a two-way street. And if you're listening to this and you're feeling like, man, this is where we're stuck, then, with a little bit of tact, I would have your partner listen to this as well, just to say, hey, could we just talk about this? Because the two of you have to both go at it with the same approach that we want to make peace, not keep peace.
And it's about a we instead of a me. Yeah. So what happens if you just keep kicking the can down the road? If you are the avoider and you just want to keep the peace and you just want to, have these unresolved things that you just never come to the table with, well, that just grows resentment.
Yeah.
You start fading apart emotionally, this emotional distance. It definitely decreases intimacy.
Yep.
Where you're like sleeping on the couch, or you really haven't had a date night in years and months and years, the erosion of trust, where you really don't feel safe with that person to even trust them with your feelings or with your struggles. And then obviously that partnership, that connection starts to die and wither. And it's like you're dying on the vine when it comes to your relationship with that person.
Yeah, and all the things that you mentioned there are sometimes how we describe this is when the relationship is rotting, right? These are typically slower onset type things, and they happen because we've just been avoiding the hard conversations. We've not been doing the work to make the peace. And so, it just happens over time. And, that's been our challenge too. It's like, wow, how long has that been going on? Well, for some time. So you have to go back and do the work.
And if you have an avoider in this relationship who's just kind of like going with the flow and you're not really fighting, but that's kind of good for them. They don't have to face conflict. But the other person could be finding their emotional support elsewhere. And this is where affairs come in. Like if we're just disconnected and we're fading away, then someone else is kind of telling me what my itching ears want to hear over here. That's where likelihood of divorce and affairs come in, pornography. I'll just take care of it myself. And so we don't want any of that for you. We, especially in a marriage, let alone a friendship, we want to create this healthy dialogue in the resolving conflict instead of avoiding it.
Yeah. So let's move in towards, well, then how do we bridge the gap, right? How do we close this up and stop some of the avoidance and open the door to the harder conversation? So I think one of the things that is just so important, guys, is you got to get grounded in something that you both believe in is important. And at the start, we just say, do you both believe the marriage is important? Do you both believe the family is important? But, hon, I'm going to go a step farther. this is where we pull in the God thing,
Yeah,
right? Because if it's just about what you two think, then it'll go all about to your way or their way.
Right.
And that's when
I win, you lose.
We hear couples all the time, oh, we're both stubborn.
Yeah.
We're both stubborn.
Yep.
And almost like, there's a badge of honor by how stubborn you can be and how hard-headed. And like right away, this is why we bring God into the picture, because God, for us to be in relationship with God, we have to be a picture of humility.
Yeah.
We have to say, oh, you're in charge and we're not. And when we can resolve that idea within ourselves, that, by the way, that's not with our partner, that's within ourselves and between us and God, that we say, God, I am going to give this to you.
Yeah.
You know better. And I want you to help us work through this. So I am willing to listen. And so the very first thing is really to start with some prayer and humility and just saying, gosh, we need help here.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. James 4:6 says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So approaching a conflict or your partner with humility and just say, hey, I know I don't have this all right, but I need your help.
Right.
Like, can we work together on resolving this? And so before you sit down, before you bring up anything specific, just really approach it in humility of like, I know that I've got work to do. I know that it's not all your fault. Don't even say it that way. Just say, I know that I'm
it's not all your fault. 99.9%, but not all of it.
But even if you think it's 95% them, just own that 5%. Lead with that 5%. Like, hey, I know that I've been pretty stubborn, or I know that I have been ignoring you. And so I really want to sit down and work through this. And I really need your help. That makes it more as a team versus defensiveness and like, I'm going to try to trump you or win over you. And that really just offers that humility in that approach. So that's the first one.
So, once you've actually sort of, put that in that humble heart inside of you, then the next part is like, we want to actually sit down and we want to have a conversation, but the conversation hopefully will look different than any conversation you've had, because it's not going to be about you talking. It's going to be about you listening. So I oftentimes, when I'm working with a couple and I kind of lightly make fun of them, and that when they sit across from each other, they're sitting like this all the time. And if you're watching this, you see my fists are up, right? In other words, they're always in the defensive mode. And so what that means is that no matter what Linda says, rather than listening to it, I'm going to have a rebuttal. I may not even let her finish her statements. I'm going to be right after how I can either prove her wrong or make myself right. And so the idea here, guys, is this actively listening. And that means keep your mouth closed. There's nothing you need to say at all at this point. And you are just listening and taking it in, all right?
Almost taking internal notes.
Yeah,
like,
taking it in.
What are they saying? How are they saying it? How are they feeling?
Yeah, and as they're speaking, when they go to finish that up, just to show yourself and them that you were actively listening, just clarify it and repeat it back in your own words that you understood it. So you're saying to me this, or it seems to me that this is the message, right? Because that way you actually have to do that. You have to think, but you have to be listening and not be thinking about your argument that you were going to throw back at them.
And I always use this example. If I said, hey, what's a wish of yours in a relationship? Like, what can I do better? Well, I would love to have more date nights. And that person in their mind has interpreted that as, oh, I don't take you out enough. And if they go, oh, so I guess I don't take you out enough, like, it's already that defensiveness, right? It's already like I shut down and I'm feeling accused. And really that partner's just saying, I just want to spend more time with you.
Right.
And so that's where the clarifying comes in. Right. That's where the listening better and really not getting so defensive and twisting it into what's this mean for me. And so if we can listen to the how they're feeling, like, man, it sounds like you're really missing time together, or it's that you want to spend, you enjoy being with me, like, get that kind of emotion out of it instead of defensiveness and blame. Right?
Yeah, sometimes if we've already felt the tension in the air, the first thing you really want to do is you want to start with an apology, right? That's owning it, even if it's at 5%. And I figuratively use that in my talks when I'm saying, hey, I'm sorry for what I did. and you will see the fists, figuratively speaking, drop because they go, oh, they're not here to attack me.
Yes.
Okay. And so those apologies, by the way, we have people who don't ever apologize. And I'm telling you, if there's one thing all of us want to practice, because that's the practice of humility, is to learn to apologize. And it doesn't mean that you failed. It means that you actually had the strength to stand up and own your part of it, because that's where change can happen.
Now, I will say that there's some women out there, and I'm sure men too, who have felt like that's all they do.
Right.
And maybe they feel like they live with a narcissist who's never wrong, right? And always trumps. And so I'm not saying you always have to apologize, but always stay in this posture of humility. Like, that is number one. And if you are coming out thinking you're always right, or you're going to put them down, or you're going to win this fight, like, you're coming in with the wrong motives and attitude, and God's not going to bless that.
Right.
So I get it where, you may have to be very firm and say, this is how I feel. This is how you've made me feel. And so especially in cases of abuse or narcissism where you really have to stand your ground. Because some people feel like they've been somebody's whipping post.
Yeah.
But again, James 1:19 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I always say, get curious, not furious. And so instead of lashing back, say, you seem really upset right now. What did I just say, or what happened that made you so upset? And if you could just kind of like peel back the layer of the onion and get curious, you may find out it has nothing to do with you. Maybe it's because the dog just bit their foot when they walked in the door, or maybe their boss just yelled at them before they got home. And so it really helps you to kind of defuse the situation.
Yeah. And if we're trying to diffuse, and we've had histories of not being able to diffuse things, and there's just always an ongoing tension, this would be a sign to you that you could use some help. You could use even just mediation. It could be a pastor, a priest, a counselor, but sometimes you need the mediator because they can take the emotion out of it and they can help hold people accountable. Yeah. It's, like if I'm in there, like I might have some ground rules, like you're not allowed to interrupt when she's speaking, right? And so if you're at a point where every time we try this, it blows up, then get a mediator involved, one that would be trusted and, would have your best interest at heart.
And we know that a lot of times because it's how you've phrased it. Maybe you're like, you are never home, or you never listen. Attacking. If you say, I feel alone in this relationship. I feel like a single parent when you're gone all the time. Like, say it that way. It comes off differently than saying you, because it kind of feels like you're pointing their finger in their face, and it's not going to go well. So let's try number 2, which is to try to be more listening actively, reading their body language as well as their words and their tone, and then seeking to understand, putting yourself in their shoes, reflecting back what they say. That's step 2.
Yeah. The third is to speak the truth in love. And I think this one's, first off, we do seek the truth. And this is not where we candy coat things to, just sort of make it way too sweet, and we didn't say the truth. We do need to speak the truth, but it is in love. And so that means that you saying the truth, but in a harsh way, and you say, well, I'm just telling you, that's how I am.
I'm just
I speak the truth. Well, you're a truth, but you're speaking it like a jerk, right? And so I think you have to recognize that people's emotions are involved here. And listen, this is a girl and guy thing. Just because you're telling the truth doesn't mean you're telling it right.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that you recognize, and kind of as you said before, that you're in a non-attacking mode, that you're owning your part of it, and you're just getting to the truth. Like, the truth is I hurt when you do this. Okay.
Yeah. And we're not talking about your truth. Okay. We're talking about God's truth. And so if this comes out of Ephesians 4, verses 14 says, you'll no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every teaching and every cunning and craftiness and deceit. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. So if you want to have a mature relationship, if you want to be a mature person who handles conflict well, you will speak the truth, God's truth, in love.
Yeah.
Doing it with gentleness and respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, as we talked about earlier, this is why it is so important to have a biblically founded
Yep.
marriage rather than just a feeling founded marriage. It's just so
I don't feel like being nice today.
yeah, because if I do it off my feelings, we are going to fail. Okay.
Yep.
And so the biblically founding this is so important because it creates a common ground that we can both step on, but it creates some natural rules of engagement.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it's really important to do that.
Proverbs 15:1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." So it's really about your tone and your approach and the words that you use to try to get your point across. It's really more of speaking that truth with that. Sometimes I know that I speak more truth than grace, and I have to kind of like soften the edges a little bit.
Well, sometimes we speak the truth in a backhanded way. We
passive aggressive.
passive aggressively. And so again, these are all the different things like, how's that working for us? So we want to be careful with that kind of thing.
Also, do not use superlatives like always and never. And
You're taking me back to English grammar now.
I don't even know if I used that right. Maybe it's not superlatives, but like extremes maybe is an easier word. Like if I'm frustrated that I've done the dishes 5 times in a row, the fact that you've never done the dishes would be a pretty big extreme. And of course, you're going to get defensive like, just last Tuesday I did. And
So the always and the nevers.
Yes, be careful with those. Catch yourself and kind of reframe that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move into the fourth thing.
Yeah.
We could talk about this one forever, but we won't. But so this next one, guys, you got to remember that people are hurt, and hard conversations oftentimes they trigger the old hurt and they can create new hurt. Yeah. And so whenever there's hurt, we've got to get to this next step, all right? And this next step is forgiveness, right? Forgiveness. And then seeking, because we're staying married here, seeking the reconciliation, right? Sometimes you forgive, but if you don't ever have to do life with a person again, you can really kind of avoid them for a long, long time, and at least you don't have that hate in your heart. But when you're having to do life with somebody, you can forgive, but if you don't reconcile, the tension stays in the room, right? And so forgiveness.
Yeah. I had a couple one time who was trying to reconcile after they had been split apart, and the husband used a phrase, and it set her off.
Yeah.
And he had no idea what set her off until we got back in the room and we started to do this work. And I said, so what was it? And she said, it's that phrase. And it took her back to before they split up. And he had no idea that was a trigger. That was a landmine, right? That he had stepped on that he had no idea was even there. But now he knows. He knows that word. He knows those phrases are really triggers for her, and it takes her back to that really high conflict season for them. So we want to heal those, right? We want to make sure. It says, Colossians 3:13 says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. Whew, that is hard.
But
God is watching.
This is Ephesians 4:32. On the tail end of that, it says the same thing. Just as in Christ, God forgave you. And so this is, again, the reason why we are founding all of this in a Christian faith, because I don't want to forgive, right? If you're relying just on me and my human nature, I want to hold this as if I'm holding you hostage, right? We've done
I'm justified.
Yes, and listen. I mean, I've worked with couples before that want to hold on to that edge for 20 plus years, and you're like, wow, how long are you going to hold on to this? So we are called to forgive. And the reason is because if you look in the mirror, you might need some forgiveness too. And Christ is willing to supply that. So this is that two-way street.
And unhealed wounds from childhood or a first marriage or an early relationship, if they're not healed right, they all come flooding back when you are wounded or struggling in a new relationship. And that person has no idea why you are so over the top upset. And it's because that unforgiveness for the spouse also has to do with dad or first husband or boyfriend. And it's like, wow, I got the full frontal barrage of that. And so we really want to work on that. That is healing for us, for our peace.
Yeah. I want to touch quickly on the reconciliation part. Remember, part of this is we have got to rebuild the trust. So when we've been hurt or we hurt somebody, they don't trust that that's not going to happen again. So reconciliation is part of the process of saying, okay, so how do we heal this? And this is, often takes some conversation. So I need you to start doing this, and we need to start approaching things like this. And so that reconciliation is a process. It is not a finger snap. It's not like, well, is all I have to do is snap my fingers and it's reconciled. Not typically. No. Typically it's going to be, because it's a trust building process.
Right. And it's not always possible.
It's not always possible. That's right.
Because it takes two. Yeah, reconciliation takes two people that are willing to trust and do that work. So I would also say, Hun, there's 3 levels for me for handling conflict. One is they've got to feel safe. Okay. Yep. So that's where domestic violence shelters come in. They say, no, you are not going to meet with your perpetrator and resolve this conflict because that person does not feel safe, whether it be physically or emotionally or sexually. And so the safety is first, then the forgiveness. Like, I got to let go of that resentment, that bitterness. It's just eating me alive. And then the trust, right? Reconciliation, if possible, in step 3. But man, you got to be safe first. And so that might be where a mediator or a counselor has to come in, right? Even a protective order to try to keep the distance and the space that you need.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the 5th part of this.
5th and final, right?
So yes, the 5th part of this, guys, is I think it's important to kind of keep the main thing. And the main thing here in a marriage is that family. And so when we get hurt, we tend to sort of hyper-focus on one part of the marriage or one part of the hurt. And so if we can focus on the unity, the things that are important that bring us together. Now, this is not to say that our kids should be the glue of the marriage, but listen, what are we fighting for here? Are we fighting so that I get my way, or are we fighting for something bigger than us? What's going to unite us? And so I think this is often, Hun, just the expectation that you have. If you expect that things are for the family and we're going to work out for the marriage, you'll compromise differently. You'll humble yourself differently. And so that's the unity part. We're going to seek, if you say we're going to go, the kids are going to bed at 8 o'clock and I say 10 o'clock, guess when the kids are going to bed?
9.
They're going to bed at 9, right? And it's really, whether that's not right or wrong, that's a matter of showing each other that, this is for our kids. Let's come together and just do it. Yeah. And we choose something that brings us together.
But Hun, as you were speaking, it does make me think, because you said for the good of the we, and us. But if you are in survival mode because of fear, because of safety, okay, you do get in this fight or flight and this me, like I've got to protect myself. And that's where you're talking about the dukes being up, right? The punching, ready to punch somebody. And that's where we've got to get to that safe place where we can let our guard down and be willing to work for unity. Because this step 5 is focus on the we, focus on the unity. Because Ephesians 4:2-3 says, be completely humble and gentle, which is our first step. Be patient, bearing with one another in love, which was our forgiveness step. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. Hun, Ephesians 4:3 is our synergy verse. And that's all about that. Make every effort for the unity of the Spirit. This isn't just in marriage. This is in friendships. This is in families. This is in businesses and communities. Wow, when unity is our priority, man, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. To your point a little bit earlier that you were making about we're talking about seeking unity when it's safe to seek unity.
Yes.
And so if your relationship is to the point where you don't experience safety, then it is time for help. So this whole show was about the idea of we don't want to get you to the point where you're feeling unsafe. Yes. So this is about not getting to that bad spot. Yeah. If you're like, I don't even feel like I can get close to any of these things, it's time for help. guys. It's time for help. So,
but there's sometimes when we are entering into a difficult conversation, and it's really not that person I'm talking to is unsafe. It's because I am in a fight or flight. I am in this real survival mode because of something else. Maybe there is unhealed wounds in me, maybe in a new relationship that I'm not healed from the old one, whatever. So get the help for yourself so that you can enter into a relationship and not be triggered, by difficult conversations.
Well, before you do any of this, jumping into this conversation, you really need to look in the mirror and see where your emotional stability is at that time. If you're still angry, if you're still scared, if you're still whatever, if you're emotionally charged, you've got to get that under control first, because you can't really think rationally when your mind's charged up with those emotions. And so whether you need to take, and by the way, that's part of it too. Like if we say, hey, can we talk about this a little bit later, or can we talk about it tonight, or can I go for a walk first? Because you've got to get yourself under a calmer, more rational mind before you enter into these things.
And as you're talking about that, I have half a dozen cases in my mind where it wasn't a healthy time to talk about difficult things, maybe because one of them was under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So they're high or they're drunk and they're wanting to come at you and have this difficult conversation. That's not the time. Maybe it's when you are in a state of fight or flight and you're anxious or you're mad. Okay, that's the time to take a time out. If someone is emotionally unstable for a variety of reasons, that's the time to say, hey, I care about you and I want to have these difficult conversations. I just don't feel it's a safe time. Maybe talk to a doctor, maybe a counselor, maybe we can get a mediator because something's up.
Yeah. Guys, hopefully these are some steps that you can start to use, because, as we often say, seldom do marriages just blow up. They usually rot out. And everything we talked about here is because, we just didn't do the daily work that it took, and conversations just got avoided. They got shortchanged, and the resentment built over time. So hopefully you can see that there's a pathway forward for you guys to start practicing these. If you need help with any of this, feel free to give us a call. You can reach us at our office at 812-576-7625. Just, let us help you walk through the process.
Yeah. And again, as we said before, Rock Solid Families is a Christian-based organization that we believe that when we have the foundation of Christ, when we have Christ over our partner's shoulder and we're looking at Christ when we speak to our partner, we handle conflict differently. We talk to people differently. And when we don't have that common bond, it really does make you unequally yoked, and it makes it harder to have those mature, healthy relationships. So if we can help in that, please reach out to us. We would love to walk alongside you.
All right, guys, thanks a lot for listening again. We want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Maxwell Construction, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and the Hoosier Ice House for coming alongside of Rock Solid Families. I think that's all we got. You want to sign us off?
So thank you so much for listening to the Rock Solid Families podcast, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day.
Rock Solid Families wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. Casey's has grown to be one of the largest and most unique garden centers and gift shops in the Cincinnati tri-state area. Whether you are looking to take on that next landscape project or simply add a little home decor to your house, Casey's has you covered. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Call them today at 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home. Rock Solid Families wants to thank Maxwell Construction for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. For over 30 years, Maxwell Construction has been a leader in turning dreams into realities, building schools, banks, restaurants, and many other commercial and public facilities. Maxwell Construction has made it their priority to not just build buildings, but to build into their community. So if you have any construction needs, Call them at 812-537-2200.
Rock Solid Families would like to thank Hoosier Ice House for being a proud sponsor of the Rock Solid Families podcast. In the heart of historic Lawrenceburg, Indiana, the Ice House is at the corner of Vine and High Streets. The historic building evokes a feeling of comfort with spacious indoor and outdoor dining, a large bar, and comfortable dining areas. Large enough to host parties, yet intimate enough to feel like your favorite neighborhood restaurant. So thank you again for the Hoosier Ice House for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast.